Hello iChurchers, it's Dan Morell here, back with another tutorial on editing your iChurch site. We are in the advanced section of the tutorials. Really, these are just additional tutorials that will help add other bells and whistles to your website. Um, they are not compulsory and not a requirement for editing your iChurch site. You'll want the first 10 videos in the playlist for that. But these are just some additional top tips. Today we are going to be looking at plugins. In the previous video, which was the second part of editing widgets, I talked very briefly about using plugins. Just an overview, plugins are basically, as the name would suggest, things that we plug in, but virtually. We install them on our WordPress site to enhance it and make it better. They are kind of little pieces of software that we can install over here. So if we go on to, we can just click plugins. We'll see a list of installed plugins. We've got all of them. We've got the active ones. So we'll just look at the active ones for now. There are an absolute wealth of plugins. There are literally thousands around, so I'm not going to kind of go through any individual specific plugins. We install a set of plugins as standard on all iChurch sites. They vary from things that just help touch up the appearance of the site all the way through to security. So please do not remove any of the plugins that we've installed because they are all there for a specific reason. But you are welcome to install any other plugins to enhance your site. But there are a couple of top tips that I've developed to help you look out for plugins that will or won't benefit your site. I'm talking particularly here from a security perspective, because as I said, there are literally thousands of plugins, and anyone is within their rights to create a plugin. WordPress is what's called open source, which means that all sorts of people can contribute to it, to the development of WordPress. And as I say, WordPress thrives off plugins. So when you choose the correct plugins and plugins that are safe and secure, then they will really enhance your iChurch site. So I don't want this to put you off from installing plugins, but as I say, just a few top tips when you're looking for a plugin. So usually you'll want a plugin for a particular purpose. So if you wanted to add a new plugin, you can just click Add New at the top here and search for one. We've got different options to search for. We've got popular ones, recommended ones, and things like that. So obviously you might just want to search for a particular plugin or a particular purpose of the plugin, keeping it nice and short because it's just searching for a keyword that will be either in the title or in the description of the plugin. So that's the fundamentals of searching for a plugin. Let's say you've found a plugin. So let's say we've got this BB Press here, which is forum software. So for those of you who have visited the iChurch site, you will see that we have a forum, which I would encourage you all to use. That uses this thing called BB Press. And very simply, if we wanted to install a plugin, we can just click Install Now, and WordPress will go through the process of installing it. This may take a few seconds. Just wait for that to finish installing. Apologies for the slight delay. So you see it's now installed, and if I wanted to use the plugin, I can simply activate it. So, on to the top tips. When we are looking for a plugin, there are several things that I always look out for when I'm choosing a plugin. So let's say I had searched for a plugin and I found one or several plugins that I like. How would I choose between them, or how would I determine whether one is safe to use or not? And most of that information can be found in the bottom chunk of the plugin display. So the first thing, we've got the rating. Ratings are really important. As I say, WordPress thrives off off it being open source and lots of people being able to contribute to it, of course we want to know that it's been rated. We want to know that people have found it good and have given it, maybe 3+, 4 or 5 stars. And of course, we want to see that lots of people have rated it as well. We don't want to choose one that's 5 stars but has only been rated by one person, because that might not necessarily be an accurate reflection of the plugin. So we want to check that it's got a high star rating and rated by lots of people as well. The next thing we want to check is how many active installations there are. Again, popular plugins are good plugins, so if they've been installed by lots of people, then it's probably a worthwhile plugin. The other thing we want to check is when it was last updated. There isn't a set time on when it should or shouldn't have been last updated, but the more recent the better, because what it shows is that the plugin creator is making constant changes and is updating the plugin very often. We talked at the very beginning on one of the very first iChurch tutorials about updating our themes and our plugins. So these updates are mainly for security purposes, because if hackers have found a way around into a particular plugin, then the plugin editors will release a security update to circumvent that hacking. So it's important that it has been updated fairly recently. A couple of months like this classic editor here is absolutely fine. Basically, in short, what you don't want to be doing is installing a plugin that was last updated over a year ago or something like that. And you'll see here it says it's compatible with your version of WordPress. Of course, if it's not compatible, then you don't want to be installing it. It's a couple of extra tips as well. As we said, it's important you keep your plugins updated because that helps give it new security protection, but also, of course, if they've made some positive changes to the plugin, maybe to make it easier to use, for example, then of course we want to be receiving that update. Final top tip, when we're going into our installed plugins, so we've got all the plugins here, you'll see, and we've got active ones and inactive ones as well. I would recommend not enabling auto updates. This is just the one of the example sites, so we're not too bothered about this. But I would always recommend manually updating your plugins. So we can disable auto updates on here on this right hand column. By default, it won't auto update. The reason for this is that sometimes updates aren't quite what the plugin editor intended for them to be. So it could be incompatible with this latest version of WordPress. And what you want to make sure is that when you update a plugin, that it won't if it changes your site, then you can just remove your plugin. Whereas if it's auto updating without you knowing, your site could suddenly go down and or it could encounter some issues and you wouldn't know why that's happened. Whereas if you're installing plugins, you can or updating plugins, sorry, if your site suddenly goes a bit dodgy, you could say, well, I just updated the classic editor, for example, so it must be an issue with the classic editor, so I'm going to uninstall that update or uninstall that plugin. So that's why I would usually disable auto updates on my plugins. Another top tip for security is just when you are not using a plugin, so when you've got ones that are inactive, you should delete them. Just in case for security reasons. So if you've got one that's inactive, even if you plan on using it in the future, I would just remove it as a matter of process. So click delete and then you can press OK and that will disappear. If you want to use it again, of course, you've got no issue with just clicking add new again and reinstalling it. But whilst you're not using a plugin, whilst you've deactivated one, then I would recommend removing them. It also just helps your site be a bit tidier and you know which plugins you're using and which ones you're needing to use. So that is a brief overview of plugins. As I said, I wasn't planning on going through any particular plugins because, as I said, the iChurch team will install plugins that we think you will find useful or plugins that you will definitely need. And there are thousands out there, so do have a look. If you find a plugin that you think you would like, but aren't sure about its reliability, then please do get in touch with the iChurch team. We'd be happy to help and happy to advise. As usual contact details, ichurch@urc.org.uk, or visit the website www.interactivechurch.org.uk. That's the end of this tutorial. See you again soon.